Welcome to the K2 Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Karen Kelly. Every week, I'll be sitting down with a sales executive where they'll share their stories and experiences that produce game-changing results. Let's be honest, sales can be a tough game. I'm sure at some point, we've all delivered a less than stellar demo, been ghosted by a client or two, and sometimes maybe we did more talking than listening. And that's where I can help. The stories and insights our guests share can be applied to your own business, your territory, or with your team, so you're not reinventing the wheel. Our weekly tactics and strategies help you get out of your head and start creating your own path towards game-changing results. Welcome back to the K2 Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Karen Kelly. Now, leaning in to really break through the noise has become, pretty challenging. I think as a result of the pandemic, it's taking a lot more to get our voice heard, to stand out, and even to have the courage to stand out and, show your vulnerability, show that that side of you that really allows you to connect with your audience. So in my conversation today with Leslie Venetz, who's the founder of Sales Team Builder, we talked about so many things about finding your unique voice. And, not only from a gender standpoint, from women in color, LGBTQ, and really just, how can we create a space for everybody where everyone feels safe, where we're encouraged and inspired to speak up, where we're moving the needle in terms of women in sales, women in color in sales, both in the individual contributor role as a sales leader role. So Leslie shares some stats about that as well as what she's seeing. She also shares, some tips and techniques about TikTok. Again, how vulnerability can be a help and also a hindrance, in terms of backlash and putting yourself out there with such a big audience. And we talked also about those who are leaning in and really showing up unapologetically, finding their voice. What are they able to do? What results and outcomes are they achieving as a result of that? That perhaps others who are maybe holding their punches, a little bit more reluctant to lean into that vulnerability, and perhaps after hearing some of that, it might invite them to loosen their grip and realize, hey, I'm going to put my hat in a little bit, and I'm going to lean into a little bit of the discomfort, because on the other side is change. And so we had a great conversation. I shared a lot of the same views of her. She definitely inspires me as a woman in sales. Even she got me on TikTok. I clearly don't have 28,000 followers like she does, but consistency over time. And so anyway, I encourage you, if you're an individual contributor starting your sales career, even 10 years in, or 15 years plus, there's definitely some nuggets to take away here. Also, sales leaders, we talked about leadership and really the importance of modeling the behavior, and how at that level can you disarm, can you lean into your vulnerability, which in turn invites your audience to do, your team to do that, and show them that you're not perfect, you don't have all the answers. Because when you do that, there's a relatability, and all of a sudden your team is putting their hand up, they're leaning in, they're asking for help, they're they're perhaps going somewhere where they otherwise wouldn't have gone. So, definitely lots of takeaways here. If you know anybody who you feel would benefit from this, please feel free to share it. And as always, we would love feedback. So please like, subscribe, and share to the podcast. Again, the more listeners, the more reviews we get, increases our reach, and again, gets our message out to a broader audience. So thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you later. So welcome to the podcast, Leslie Venetz. I'm excited to talk to you today about really finding our unique voice. And, when you think about the amount of noise going on today in the virtual environment, and what it takes to really stand out and avoid being commoditized and move out of the comfort of conformity. We really do have to find our unique voice, but it can be very vulnerable at all stages of the sales journey, whether you're new, 10 years in, or even a sales leader. So first of all, welcome to the podcast. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey from recently leaving corporate to going on your own, and how you leverage your unique voice to navigate that experience.
Absolutely. Well, first, thank you so much for having me. Really excited for this conversation. And I think that topic of finding your unique voice is such an important one, and I think it's one that a lot of people struggle with, or they're on the journey with, and they're kind of still figuring it out. And that's certainly true for me. I'm not perfect. I'm not all the way there, but can share a bit about what my journey has looked like. So in 2018, Karen, I had come out of two back to back really, really toxic work environments. So toxic that I don't think I fully grasped how much damage they had done, how much sexism there was, how much like toxic bro culture and toxic masculinity and gender discrimination there was, and until they were about a year in my rear view mirror. And at the same time, I was building out the minimum viable product and a go to market plan for a startup. I was hired as the first employee. So it was kind of this moment where I felt like women deserved better. I had seen the damage that gender discrimination and sexism can do. And I'd also just created a successful company for somebody else. And I kind of thought, if I can do it for this dude, why can't I do it for myself and have it focus on helping women find their unique voice, and not just women, really any marginalized voice in sales? Like, how can we make sales a more inclusive profession? And I'll be really honest, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing when I started. I knew I wanted to help, but I wasn't really sure how to help. So for those first few years, I just started sharing my story. And as I got more and more comfortable and sort of spent more time in therapy, dealt with more of the trauma, I shared more of myself. I was more vulnerable, and letting women know that they're not alone. I connected and I created a community, but I didn't really think sales team builder would be my full-time job. I thought it would be my passion project, my purpose project, and I'd stay in corporate America. I had this idea in my head, Karen, of my path to chief revenue officer, and the boxes I needed to check and the roles I needed to have between where I started and that big achievement. Um, so I last year in 2021 was interviewing for VP of sales roles, which in my head was my next step on my path to CRO. And it was such a terrible experience that it broke me. Like it absolutely broke me. I found myself one day like just sitting on the carpet in my living room crying. There was so much just sexism and gender discrimination. The absolute and utter lack of respect for sales as a profession was just glaring. And I found myself sort of thinking, look, why am I working so hard to stay in a space that clearly doesn't want me? And like, is B2B sales still my passion? Which for anybody that knows me, that should make their like jaw drop, that I would even think those thoughts. So I stopped interviewing. I spent a little bit of time sort of looking inward, and I decided to leave corporate America so that I could focus 100% of my energy on supporting women in sales, on making sales a more inclusive, respected profession. And that's where I'm at now.
Wow, what a story! Up and down. You had me leaning in with emotion. It was kind of like watching a movie, but unfortunately, a bit of a sad movie. And so I want to just kind of touch on a few things, Leslie. First of all, thank you for sharing that, because I think it really does shed a light on others who are perhaps going through a similar situation, and they may not have the courage to do what you did after experiencing such toxicity, and then finding the courage and not allowing that to waver your belief to go and follow your dream of launching Sales Team Builder. So I think, not I think, I really hope that message for anyone who's on the cusp of maybe this isn't for me, to lean in and say, you know what, don't give up. Like, don't give up, because there are good, even within what you shared, I'm sure there's still some good companies out there. But on the other hand, if you are, really looking to go on your own and take that entrepreneur path, not to give up, and that comes back to, really having that resiliency and that thick shell. But you can see how it could be, whittled away a little bit when it's sexist, and it's so, you feel unwelcomed for your gender, so I get that. What I see is the profession itself isn't respected, and that's just, the spray and pray and the pitching and all that stuff. But when you take it a level below that and you're categorizing somebody or denying them opportunity or time or speech because of their gender, that for me is when the gloves come off.
Yeah, you're so right. I mean, it's one thing to be in a profession that is generally sort of looked at as a yucky profession, is generally sort of looked at, not even as a profession, it's looked at as a job that people do, not even an important enough job to really be considered a profession. And then you go that layer deeper to be a marginalized voice in that community. And I mean, you look at the facts with women in sales, depending on the study that you look at, only about 35% of the current B2B sales professionals are women. And then when you look at the percent of women in sales leadership, that drops down to 12 to 19%, 19% on the generous side. So there are just not that many women in sales. And there are even fewer women in leadership roles. Gosh, if you look at women of color in leadership roles, it drops down into the single digits. And when I was interviewing, I was primarily interviewing with early stage founders. And so that is also a hugely male dominated space. I mean, in 2021, only 2% of VC funding went to female founders. And even if they had a male co founder, that only went up to 16%.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just me talking
Mm.
mostly to white men about a job that they, whether it was conscious or subconscious, thought that a white man should be doing.
Mm-hmm. That look alike, you don't look like me, therefore you cannot do what I do. Wow. And so, 35% women, that's still a staggering statistic. And the irony is there's so many statistics that show how a diverse team outperforms a non diverse team. So it's just, it kind of shows that, it's that old mentality that people aren't willing to open their eyes, take a step back and look. We live in a melting pot. Like, let's just embrace that and look at what other people can bring to the team that aren't like us, that challenge our thinking, that make us aware. What we do to our customers, challenge their thinking, heighten their awareness to get them thinking of something they wouldn't have otherwise thought of. How can, if we're asking our team to do that, why then can we not shine that light on us and say, hang on a minute, let's look at the hiring process and how can we take a little bit of our own advice here?
Oh, it's so true. I mean, the pieces that make sales as a profession so fun are those elements of curiosity, are those elements of creativity. So it makes sense that the most productive, the highest performing teams are going to embody that curiosity, that diversity, that creativity, that willingness to absorb new perspectives, in their own culture.
Yeah, I love that. I can just draw upon my own experience in corporate, thinking you go in with your own perspective, your own vision, and then someone challenges and you're like, God, but I've always thought this way. But then you grow and you're like, holy cow, I never considered it. And so if you're doing a group collaboration session and you're on this level, like you leave there and you're 8 levels out, you're this wide and you think, oh my God, we were so tunnel visioned. Our creativity, the opportunities, the angle in which we're now going to present this looks nothing like it did when we got into this meeting.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that is, it's so true. And how boring would it be to be a know-it-all versus a learn-it-all? Like
Mm,
constantly getting to try something new, try something for the first time, figure out some
hmm.
new big bets to place. That's what makes it fun and keeps it interesting.
Yeah. The only thing I can say is, ego plays a big role in what I've seen in going through corporate and just, when you're at the top like that, you play it safe and it's always been this way. And I feel that that's why there's not a lot of change because they're only letting people in that look and sound like them. So if you have a different view, you're not welcome here. And so not all companies are like that, but that's kind of what I was privy to. And you just think, God, it's such a missed opportunity for clients, for business, but also for talent, especially now. It's like you are missing 53% of the reason why people buy is the person. Like you're missing a huge opportunity on getting great talent.
On getting a talent pool that looks like the customers you serve.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So let me just pause on these stats for a moment. So 12 to 19% are in leadership as women. Do you think that's going to improve or increase as a result of, more remote work? Because I feel a lot of the reason why is women had to manage, the children going on maternity leave and kind of the household a little bit, but because there's a little bit of work life integration, perhaps less travel. Are you seeing any shift, or are you perhaps forecasting any shift that number might get a little bit bigger because we can do a little bit more of a dual role?
Yes, 100%. I think it's very small. I think it's going to be a
Mm,
small improvement, but it'll be an improvement. And you nailed it, Karen, that those opportunities to have better balance, or just to even ditch a commute, so that you have the opportunity to drop your child off at daycare, pick your care, like whatever it is. But the opportunity for working parents, whether it's a mother or not, but the opportunity for working parents to um, have more flexibility due to a remote environment, that's going to have an impact, I think a knock-on impact. But we also know that a huge number of women left the job market during the pandemic. So I
mhm,
think it's going to be a build back before we can get ahead sort of situation. And that doesn't account for things like the lack of maternity leave, which impacts women in sales more than it impacts women in other careers, because almost all sales roles have a base pay element and then also a commission element. So even if your company has maternity leave, it's on the base pay. So you're already losing usually 50%, 50 to 60, 40 to 60%, we'll say, is like a normal amount of
mhm.
commission to be included in your on target earnings. Um, so I yes, I want to be positive. Yes, I think we're tracking, but I'm very much left with a sense of it's just not enough. Like we cannot sit in or celebrate these very, very small wins when there's so much more work to be done.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And every time it's, International Women's Day or something, it's just like, or Girl Boss, it's like, when's the day when we can just say it's like International Boss Day, or just remove the title? Like, why can't we just be the same as everybody else?
Oh, so I have two thoughts on that. The first one is very funny. Did you see the Twitter campaign that happened this International Women's Day on equal pay?
No, I did
Oh
not.
my gosh, go to Twitter when you are done listening to this episode. It's hilarious. Every British company, because they have to have transparency in their earnings, that posted about International Women's Day, another Twitter account came behind them and left a tweet about the pay gap in their organization. It
Oh.
was amazing. I mean, not amazing because the pay gaps were shocking and disappointing and horrifying, but it
Mm-hmm.
was hilarious. Because to your point, it's like, why why do we only care about gender equity or pay equity one day a year or two
I
days a
know.
year? It should be a given all of the
Mm-hmm.
time. We should be working towards it all of the time. But I think to an extent I have a somewhat unpopular opinion on the like women in sales or female founders. And it's not that I don't think we should be able to just be founders. Like that's the goal, right? We're all on an equal playing field. But the reality is that today we're not. Like there are a ton of factors that make it more difficult for women to be successful in corporate America, in B2B sales, as a founder, etc. So I think it's important to be intentional about platforming those voices, calling out those voices, amplifying those voices. And I also think it's an important way for women to find their community, which we deeply, deeply need, to know that we're not alone and to have that support to have the hard times and continue to go forward. So, yes, that would be so nice eventually. But today, I'm still a fan of saying like I'm a woman in sales, I'm a female founder, I'm a woman owned business, and I like to own those titles because I think that it's more special to be a female founder than to just be a founder.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Fair enough. It's again open to hearing everyone's. I mean, I fall into that bucket as well, right? I haven't really given it a lot of thought. What I took away from that, Leslie, is especially with that Twitter thing. I think that's great actually, because what it highlights is hypocrisy and this whole compliance, especially when you look at diversity and inclusion and you look at, oh yeah, we check the box, we're compliant, and it's like on paper you are. It's like your mission statement. On paper we are, but do you embody that? Is that embedded within your culture? Do your people feel that? And it's just such a it's so BS. And it's just like, at what point are we going to call people out and say, okay, show me, like, or let's talk to your team and let me ask them, do they feel that they are equally supported? Do they feel that they're getting, the same opportunities and all these things? So it kind of, forces people to task and say, okay, that's great. You're compliant. Show me.
The compliance is an interesting way to frame it, because it's so often that when we think about DEI as a framework, people stop at diversity because
Mm-hmm.
that's what's easy to track and measure. So they can be compliant with their diversity requirement, but they aren't creating inclusive environments. They aren't creating equity within their processes. And you and I both know, and I'm sure many of the listeners do as well, that it is not enough to hire a woman if you then don't create an environment where she feels safe and where she feels included in the conversation.
Yeah. And so, what would you say, Leslie, to those leaders listening and perhaps are not of that mindset? How can we start shifting it so that we're increasing the 12 to 19%? These younger generations that are coming into sales can actually see somebody like them that gives them the aspiration, the inspiration to go, I want to be like you. I want to be the VP. I want to be the CRO. But when you're entering a boardroom and you see six white men and you don't look like them, it kind of makes that goal, you talk about visualizing your goals. There's nothing to visualize there because there's one of these things that don't look like the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think there's some easy things that we are seeing more organizations do just to get more women in the door, like removing a lot of the gendered language from job adverts. We don't need to only be hiring aggressive ninja athletes. All the data shows that that's actually not who is most successful in sales roles anyway. So maybe first start with those simple basic things, like how do you make a career in sales more approachable for women? How do you make your own culture, job adverts process more approachable, more equitable for not just women, but any marginalized voice? And then when you welcome women into the company, I think it's really important to acknowledge that you might have to put in a little bit more work to make that atmosphere feel safe. If it is six dudes in a meeting and one woman, it is your responsibility to say, Karen, I've not heard from you yet.
Mm-hmm.
What's your opinion on this? If you hear somebody else claim a woman's idea, speak over a woman, you see a microaggression, as a leader, it is your responsibility to speak up and identify that problem and make sure that you are giving voice to the women, the minorities on your team. So I honestly think they're somewhat small actions. The revolution can come from pretty small actions, but it is about being really intentional. And I think it's about taking the step from allyship and saying, like, well, sure, of course I think we should have more women in sales, to those actions that show that you support women in sales and that you
Mm-hmm.
are going to advocate for us to have more opportunities to lead. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a ton of data that also shows that organizations that have more women in leadership view women more competently. So, surprise,
Mm-hmm.
surprise.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think, leaders, irrespective of gender, they have to be intentional. They have to show up with purpose and they have to understand and be able to, clearly articulate why they do what they do every day and not even say it, show it so that people feel it, right? Because words are cheap. action is where it happens. So I love what you said about just, and I can tell you in my corporate background, most times I was the only woman in both on the team and in the boardroom with the customer. And oftentimes it went around and around, and I'm like, I actually didn't speak this whole meeting. I'm like, and then you're like, well, should I? Like, do I just repeat? Am I the parrot now and just repeat? And so I think it's incumbent upon the leader to just do what you say and say, like, Leslie, I haven't heard from you. What are your thoughts? But I think tonality plays a role there, and we really have to create a safe space so they don't feel centered out. And then they're thinking, oh, I'm being set up now, and I'm not going to, I'm not going to, you have to encourage free thought and free speech. And the way you handle it, if it's not authentic and they don't feel that you're sharing, you're doing this with their best interest at heart, you're going to, put them down a deeper hole there. So I think those are great. And even though they may seem small, I think the results will be very significant.
I agree. I agree. And I think that creating a culture of psychological safety, of having that trust, that's like a great point to pin, because without that, it's a bit meaningless. Like the don't, what did you say? Don't say it, show it. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah. And I just think of, like sometimes sales leaders, they overthink this. And it's like, imagine that was your daughter, your niece, your little neighbor's kid, whoever. Like, wouldn't you want the best for them? Like just kind of like take off all the armor, just be like, they're just a human. Like, why do we have to stigmatize? Let's just get the job done and let's work together. And just, I don't know, it feels like we're making it so much harder than it needs to be.
Agreed. Agreed. I feel like there's enough space for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, Leslie, keeping with, the unique voice. Now, I would call you a TikTok sensation. So, I want to just kind of talk a little bit about, we talked about, and this is a good segue because we talked about women in sales, your struggle or navigating the difficulties of moving from corporate and the toxic culture to going out on your own. And through that, I would imagine, your sense of belief, your sense of resiliency, and just self worth have improved. But then you show up on TikTok and it feels like this is your unique, unapologetic voice. And I'd love to know a little bit about what that journey looked like. And, just for anyone not watching, here we go. This is this girl here, 28,000 viewers. So that doesn't come lightly. So perhaps walk us through a little bit about why TikTok. Like, what prompted you? Was it to say, I need to get my message out there and I want it away from the B2B space? Was this when you were kind of jaded saying, screw you corporate, I'm going this route? Or talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So it was actually a little bit more like screw you, LinkedIn,
Okay.
which I love LinkedIn. LinkedIn is still my primary channel. I'm on LinkedIn sharing content every single day. But there is an element of LinkedIn that's like very broy, really celebrates hustle culture. And it was about 18 months ago. And it just felt like that was my entire news feed, was like, get up at 5 a.m. and hit the gym for 2 hours. And if you're not successful, it's because you don't want it bad enough. And it's not surprisingly, like the posts were 95% from white dudes. And I just was getting so angry, Karen. I was just getting so
Mm-hmm.
angry. Um, and so I knew I wanted to start creating content that was more centered on the experience of women in sales. And I did not feel safe creating it on LinkedIn slash I just knew it wouldn't get any traction. So like why try to create it for a channel that isn't going to reward that type of content? And I looked at the Twitter and Facebook and all of that. And at the time, interestingly, it was right when Clubhouse launched and everybody was running to Clubhouse, and that didn't feel right to me. So it was when TikTok was about ready to get banned in the US, but I started a TikTok account and I was finding like a community already and these shared experiences and shared voices, not specifically for women in sales, but just kind of that same conversation. And I thought, this is where I should share my story, because I can show up and be 100% unapologetically myself. So that's why I started the channel. And it's been an amazing, an amazing journey. I've been so grateful to like be at the actual forefront of creating this B2B sales talk community. But it has also had its rough points. Because I am showing up in a much more authentic way, I think it's easier to get my feelings hurt because I'm really
Mm-hmm.
putting all of me out there. And, interestingly, I had two pretty tough dips on TikTok. One was when Jordan Belfort, the guy that Wolf of Wall Street is based on, yeah, he stitched one of my videos, which pretty much means he took part of one of my videos and then did his own reply to it, where he called me stupid for wanting to hire people that care about their customers. And the backlash from that, it was bad, like really bad, really hateful, and like particularly hateful because I was a woman. Like some really gross, really nasty comments. If you saw my filters about which words are now blocked from being commented on, you would probably gasp a little bit. So I had to pull back from TikTok for a few weeks after that one, but was like, no, this is my space. I deserve to take up space here. Screw those dudes. So I came back, and then a few months later, I had a video just about how I was a proud B2B sales professional. And I don't know who the algorithm pushed it out to, but it was another backlash of people being like, all salespeople should die. Like, F you, salespeople are the worst. Like, call me and I'll murder you. Like, just so aggressive. And because there is an anonymity on TikTok that doesn't exist on LinkedIn,
Mm-hmm.
it, it became a toxic environment for totally different reasons
Yeah.
than LinkedIn was. So I still love it. I still post daily. I still get at least once a week these amazing messages from people saying, I used this and I closed a deal, or I asked this and I got the job, or I was about ready to leave sales and I heard your story and realized it wasn't me, it was my manager. And that's why I keep showing up. But like, I have stopped playing the algorithm. I've stopped reading my comments. I block comments. I delete comments. I block people without hesitation now. And interestingly, it's had a hugely negative impact on my growth. It was about 7 months when I decided to pull back. And 7 months ago, I was at 25,000 followers. And now 7 months later, I'm at about 28.5. So it's
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting that like TikTok is almost punishing me for not being willing to take the
Yeah.
abuse. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd still really encourage people to show up on TikTok to join the sales talk community. But there are some moments where it's like, well, I just can't win, can I?
What I think, what I take from that, Leslie, is think about sales and just, don't take things personally. From 28,000 people that are following you that value you, what you say, and you got two. Like let's look at the positives versus the two. And what I also take from that is anybody following Jordan Belfort, like that's that mentality. Like that's that. Of course, they're going to agree with him because that's that they come from a completely different camp. So that's one thing and the fact that he stitched your video, that's a huge compliment. You went on his radar. He took the time to go and say
It
that.
was
I'd be like, thank you.
so weird. It was, and I only had like maybe 10,000 followers at the time. So, I mean, I was like a
Yeah.
very much a micro influencer at the time. And it was because I said, I think sell me the pen is a lazy interview question.
Yeah.
I didn't even say it was bad. I just said
Mm-hmm.
it was lazy because there's so many other ways to identify how somebody thinks about the sales process or
Mm-hmm.
their sales philosophy without referencing a movie that highlights salespeople as scam artists and thieves and drug addicts and womanizers. So it did not sit well with him. But yeah, it is. I think like so many things in my career, I recently described it as kind of feeling like I have been strapped into the front cart of a wooden roller coaster, and it's a rickety ride already, but then I find out that like the coaster missed its last few maintenance checks, and now I'm like, oh my gosh, am I just gonna fly off the edge of the rails at any point? Like it is a balancing act, and I'm a fan of kind of always pushing
Hmm.
gently against my boundaries to see what else I'm capable of, and where else I can make an impact. And sometimes I push too hard, and I really have to dial it back to protect my mental health and
Hmm.
set firmer
Yeah, I can.
boundaries.
I can see how that would be very important and almost critical, um, because it's good. It's good, first of all, to always push ourselves, in the incremental growth and lean into the discomfort, because I always say that's where change is on the other side. But to the extent where there's 28,000 voices that could release a screw in your wooden roller coaster and end up, the bottom somewhere. But good for you for keep going. And let me ask you this, Leslie, with your voice and how you're helping others and all the positive messages of resonance that you're getting, is there also a sense from you of comfort and solace in just saying, like, this is a place where I can go and just share kind of what I'm seeing, and does it help you as well?
Yes, I think the answer is yes. Probably not the TikTok so much. That very much for me has been about helping others, and like how can I let other women know they are not alone and the way they're being treated is not acceptable, and that's what gives me the sort of gusto to keep going. But as part of this process, really of finding my own voice over the past few years, I've been writing a lot
Mm-hmm.
more, and like writing and taking back ownership of my own story. And then, really, I would say in the past year, starting to post some of that stuff on LinkedIn, which that's a big evolution in my journey and finding my own voice, just to have the confidence and the trust in my LinkedIn community to be able to show up like so authentically and really put the good,
Mm-hmm.
bad, and the ugly out there. That has been healing, in a huge way. Like really taking back my story and not letting competing narratives or imposter syndrome win. That has been really helpful and really healing.
Mm-hmm. That's great to hear, and I can say I've experienced similar journey in terms of my writing, and I do a biweekly blog. And the more emotional, the more raw I am, the clicks are there, the emails are always there. Oh my God, this, and part of me is like, is this too much? I let them in my personal life, and they're like, that's when you get, holy cow, I didn't know that, me too, and this hit home so much, and I'm just like, so I just keep going. So when you say you keep on leaning in, part of it for me is my audience is inviting me to lean in based on the feedback that I'm getting from them. So be careful what you wish for.
I know. And it's a beautiful thing. And I think about the clients that I'm privileged to have right now, and it is predominantly women sales leaders and women founders, or folks from the LGBTQIA community,
Hmm.
or folks of color.
Hmm.
And like I was talking to the CMO of Electric last week, and she had kind of gotten chastised for using curse words on a
Oh yeah, I
session.
saw
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
And I thought it was so relatable. I immediately was like, oh, like you're so real. Like I feel so much more comfortable. I want to really listen to what you have to say because I trust that you're going to be honest.
Hmm.
And I guess she got some negative feedback, but in the conversation, I was like, I have learned in the past few years that it is better to not be everybody's cup of tea, because
Hmm.
that allows you to find the right people. And I think as founders, as salespeople, whatever, like there's this whole batch of qualified people that we could potentially work with or potentially serve, right? But isn't it so much more fun to get to work with and partner with and build communities with the folks that share the same vision and values that we do?
Hmm. I talked about that before, just creating a polarizing message. So 80/20, you want to attract 80% and repel the 20. And I think those who are not willing to do that have this scarcity mindset that I have to be everything to everybody. And it's like, you're never going to be accepted by Jordan Belfort. Like, let's get over that. And let's not tailor to him. Like, let's just know who our audience is and kind of stay in that sweet spot. Like, the riches are in the niches, and just focus on that and be okay with that, so that there's an alignment. You're compressing sales cycles and we're speaking the same language.
Mm, that's so true. I might have to take that and make a TikTok of
Uh,
it.
so I was inspired. I started TikTok, maybe last year, and I did, I think, one. And for me, my image is pretty corporate. I did corporate for 20 something years, and so when I go on TikTok, it's like corporate, with a side of, I don't know, you're still corporate.
Spice.
Well, I'm trying, but I do find, even when I do the recordings, it's more of a, not a venting session, but it's like I'm telling you the experience I went through, as a customer for whatever I'm doing. So this is the reason why we don't do it. This is so I find it very liberating, just to kind of be me, totally me, and be like, this sucks. Like, don't do that. But I did it, but the reason I know is because I used to do it too. So there's an element of vulnerability as well. But I definitely started leaning in more because of you. So thank you for that.
My pleasure. I love that.
So just kind of keeping in theme with a unique voice, as we kind of come to the end of the conversation here. What do you see those who are vulnerable enough, brave enough, that are leaning into their and finding their unique voice at any stage of their sales journey? So whether they're, new, midway, at 15-year plus, and also, yeah, let's say on sales reps first. What are they doing, or what outcomes are they achieving as a result of that? Is there a difference? It's kind of rewarding, going, like, when you lean in, whether it's in the prospecting and the discovery, and you're willing to go there, this is what separates those that are doing it versus those that are kind of playing it safe.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think part of it, to your story about your blog, and sort of the more you opened up, the more people leaned in. There is something hugely relatable about being vulnerable. So I think a piece of it is that you become human. Like, you're not a important VP of sales, or a founder, or some big influencer. You are a human being. And I think there's something really powerful in humanizing ourselves by sharing our stories and by admitting it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Um, I also would say to people that, like, you don't feel obligated to give pieces of yourself to the public before you're ready.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that was really important to me. Like, I had to go through some internal healing before I was ready to put those pieces out there. And so it's okay if you don't have everything to give at first. Like, it can be a journey. Share what you're comfortable sharing. And I think it's really important for folks to remember, whether they're like 30 days into their first sales job or 30 years into sales, is that everybody has something to teach everybody else. Everybody has this lived experience that they bring to the table that might give them a different lens on the same, perspective, or the process that they're executing in sales, or the way they're going to approach a customer. So know that your lived experience makes your voice and your perspective unique. Know that no matter where you are in your journey, there's somebody that can learn from you. There's somebody that you can inspire. So, like, show up with that mentality. And I think it will ultimately evolve to that place where you can become more and more vulnerable. The more vulnerable you are, the more relatable you are, the more human you are. And that's really attractive to an audience and a community.
I think those are all really great points. And even that one, now a lot of people are jumping on the vulnerability train, but like you said, like, don't throw it all out there. Like, do it, because you have to also be prepared for the backlash if it comes. So if you're not ready yet, incrementally release a little bit until it feels safe, until you kind of get your groove for it, which I would agree with. But I would also say, sales leaders, and I always say this, that we need to model the behavior. And so if we're getting up in front of our team and we're saying, we got all the answers, we got this figured out, we knew the pandemic, we saw it coming. You're like, really? How can we also disarm? How can we let them know that we don't have all the answers, but we'll figure it out together? Because once you create that, there's a relatability. And then you're inviting your team to also disarm and say, okay, now I feel comfortable coming to you because there's not this expectation of perfection. I have it all figured out, because I don't. And so think about people that perhaps were new to sales, they had a remote onboarding, they've never met their team, and then they show up and everyone's got it figured out and they're like, holy cow, I'm so not deserving of this job. And then they exasperate and they get in their head so much. So I think sales leaders have a way more important role now to really lean into their own discomfort of sharing, and knowing that by sharing, there's something really positive and beautiful on the outside.
Ooh, I love that call to action. And I think that most people don't want to work for a sales leader that's perfect or has all
Mm,
the answers, right? Like we want to work for people that have integrity, who are competent, who we can trust, but who also have the humility to say, I didn't foresee the pandemic. I don't have it all
mm,
figured out, but we're on this journey together. I'm going to be as transparent with you as I possibly can. And we will get to this shared outcome as a team.
mm-hmm. I think it draws for me. The minute you swear, I'm like, you got me. I'm leaning in. But you also get me when there's humility, because I just think you were willing to swear. You're showing that is vulnerable. You're showing us a little bit of who you are, your personality, but also the humility. The minute I see that you are okay to share your mistakes, and in the absence of that, I think, what else are you hiding? If you think it's all figured out and you're putting this perfection, like, A, that's complete insecurity, but what else are you hiding? What else have you told me an answer to that perhaps, it's really not true? You start eroding trust that I'm not even going to go to you anymore.
That's so true. That's such a good point. Like it can actually have the counter effect that's
Mm-hmm.
intended. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So, Leslie, in terms of a final message, we're the goal here is to really help increase diversity, equity, inclusion within the sales force. If people are still feeling a little bit like, I'm holding my punches, I'm not allowing my voice to be heard, I'm not finding my voice, and I'm kind of, wearing a few layers, what's the final piece of advice you would just encourage them, having gone through what you've done, to really lean into that, knowing that there is some positivity, and there is reward at the end of the tunnel?
hmm I mean, first, I would say I get it and validate why they probably are keeping a few layers on. They're probably doing it to protect themselves. But I would remind them that their voice matters, and it matters that they take up space. And it's like beyond it mattering, like it is their right to take up space. There is enough space for all of us.
I love that. I just get so empowered. I just want to start marching or something when I hear that. Like, yeah, like take your seat at the table, like lean the heck in and find that voice. And, and last thing I'll add is leaders. We have to really protect and create that safe space so that there's no mansplaining and there's no, women not finding their voice. Help them to create so that in time you're not having to say, Leslie, what are your thoughts? Leslie knows now. She's leaning in, goes, hey guys, I got something to add here. They want to hear it now. So we have to train them and create this behavior that it is safe. But we got to start somewhere.
It's true. It's that cultural transformation from ally to advocate, from
Yeah.
diversity to actual inclusion and equity that is so important. Scary,
Mm-hmm.
probably,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe a bit daunting, but so important.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, Leslie, you've shared so much insight and passion and tactical tips around, navigating from corporate to entrepreneurship, TikTok, resiliency, and really, how do you find and keep your unique voice and show up unapologetically? So thank you so much. You've definitely continued to inspire me as a female business owner, and having worked my entire life, usually being the only woman in the room. So thank you. For those people who are listening and they say, I want to learn a little bit more about Sales Team Builder, or would like to connect with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Absolutely. Well, you can find me on TikTok at Sales Tips Talk. I also live on LinkedIn. It's under my name, Leslie Venetz. Can't miss it. And I just launched a brand new website with my brand new headshots and my brand new logo. Whole new Leslie, whole new adventure at InsideSalesTeamBuilder.com.
Okay, well, that is so exciting. So we'll include all of that in the show notes. I would highly encourage you to follow TikTok and look into her new program. And thank you so much, and continue to shine brightly for all out there.
Thank you, Karen. Thanks for this conversation.